Hello, John. How's it going?
Good, good, Bart. How are you?
Pretty good, John. So, where are you playing this hand out of?
Generic city in the Midwest.
Okay. Generic city in the Midwest. A generic city in the Midwest. What would that be the best example of a generic city in the Midwest? Maybe like in Indianapolis, Cleveland, Omaha, something like that. So we'll go with that. Okay. And what's the size of the game? Wait, what game are you playing?
Yeah, you're hitting the right notes for sure.
Okay.
It it's 2-5-10,
2-5-10. Okay. Cap buy-in or what?
no cap. Or
Two
it
five
might be
ten.
match the stack, but technically no cap.
Okay.
Cool. I'll hop right into it
Yeah, go
then.
get right into it.
Yeah, so 2-5-10, we're nine-handed. It's a relatively young, aggressive table. Villain is in the hijack. He has about 2K and
Okay.
is the effective stack.
Yep.
He's effective, but I mean I have close to the same, and I don't think stacks really come into play in this hand.
Okay.
Preflop action, the villain opens from the hijack to 35,
Okay.
folds to me in the small blind. I have red sevens.
Yep.
I elect a flat. I'm not worried about either of the two players behind me three betting. Don't really want to bloat the pot with sevens, so I think a call is fine.
Well, I mean, the deeper you are, you do have some flats in the small blind, as I will always continue to point out in a three blind structure. So this is 2-5-10. You do want to do more three betting if it is close, just because, again, if it was two blinds, all that really has to happen is the big blind folds and then your head's up. But with three blinds, people feel like they get priced in. Then all of a sudden you get the middle blind calling, you get the straddle calling, and then it's basically impossible to win unless you flop a set. It's really hard to realize your equity. So I lean towards playing a three bet or fold strategy against late position opens in a three blind format out of the small blind. But you would still have some flats against a tighter range, some earlier position types of opens. I mean, sevens is sort of in there. I don't think anybody's going to get on you at this stacked up for calling. What do the people in the blinds do?
Big blind folds and the straddle calls.
All right, so straddle calls. It looks like you're off three ways worth, I don't know, like 100, $105 in there, right?
105, yep.
All right. Okay.
So 105 to the flop, it's 10 of diamonds, 8 of diamonds, 6 of spades.
So 10 of diamonds, 8 of diamonds, 6 of spades. So you have sevens. So you have a gut shot here to a 9. You did not hit your set. Okay.
And some
Backdoor diamonds.
significant blockers.
Yep.
Cool. So I check, straddle checks,
Mm-hmm.
villain bets 50.
So hijack bets 50. So like half the size of the pot. Okay.
And I decide to check raise to 175.
So I remember this, looking at this hand here, because I was like, oh, this, sort of definitely non-standard right off the bat. The only thing that I'll say, because right off the bat, I was like, oh man, this is getting kind of out to left field. But it's probably a better play three ways than heads up. Like if you were heads up here, I don't really think there's a need to check raise all that much. You know what I mean? But if you make the case that the big blind, the straddle is going to fold out everything, like an 8 or a 10, and you think that you can get the preflop raiser, the C better, and the hijack off of some better hand, I suppose you could make a case for starting this type of play. The only thing that I would say about like sort of the properties of the draw when you make it is that it's kind of like the definition of unhidden, right? Like if you had a 9, it's a one-liner. If you had a 7 for a set, it's a one-liner. So, there's that. Honestly, I would be just doing a lot of folding here. If I had called in the small blind, I'd just do a lot of folding with the guy behind me. If if you
Yeah,
weren't heads up.
that's fair. I wanted to get a little spicy here. I thought I could obviously fold out a lot of unpaired overcards, and I thought I could start to put some pressure on any single pair, an 8, a 10, any overpair, just because with my blockers, I can represent 7, 9. And I was really looking at the equity, a 7 or a 9, hitting a 7 or a 9 as an added bonus, but I was fully planning on starting a bluff here.
Right. I mean, a couple things on that. Sure, you could look at it like you have kind of almost like a 6-out draw, although you don't always know if your 7 comes, if it's good with one of the other players that are in there. You keep saying, well, I've got blockers, because with like 7-9. Sure. I mean, somebody else doesn't have, there's less of a chance someone else has 9-7, but I mean, I doubt you're V-pipping in the small blind as a cold call with 9-7 if that's what you're trying to represent. The reason why I bring that up is because if I was the pre-flop raiser and I thought that you were, a decent player and, you played some, decent ranges pre-flop and I had an overpair on 10-8-6 and I bet and you check raised me, you're not representing a whole lot here in terms of a value range that flat calls out of the small blind, like maybe sets. If,
I think I have sets, and I have 7-9 suited for sure.
In the small blind? I mean, you shouldn't, but
it was player dependent. With the guy I was playing against and not being scared of the two people behind me, just realistically, I would probably play 7-9 suited, even though I shouldn't in this spot.
Okay. I mean, there's that. I want to bring it back to basics though, too. I mean, one of the biggest mistakes I think people can make pre-flop, that's one of the easiest things to clean up, is you do not want to be out of position with a gap suited connector, especially suited connectors, multi-way, number one, and then also a gap suited connector. I mean, you've got all the stuff going wrong for you here. This is why I would not flat with a hand like 9-7 in a 3-blind configuration where people are probably going to complete behind you. You're going to be out of position. Then you have a gap suited connector. If you were on the button, sure, we can go back to old 10, 15, 25, 35 times crush live poker, which means can you make 35 times off the raise size if you're just trying to hit, to hit your hand and you guys are deep enough, but that all goes out the window out of position. So if you say you're going to have 7-9 fine, I'm just telling you from a perspective where if I thought somebody had a reasonable range in the small blind, I'd be like, oh, it's like sets. I mean, you shouldn't even really have 10-8 here either. With that being said, you raise to 175. Does the straddle fold?
Straddle folds.
Okay.
And the villain calls pretty quickly.
All right. So fold, and then the villain calls. The other thing too, I don't know what the deal is with this villain, but this type of board, if you're dealing with any type of aware player, like he's not going to be doing a whole lot of c-betting with like total air here. Like it's not a good c-bet to make here with like ace king of hearts or ace queen of hearts or something like that. So when you get a c-bet on these types of textured boards, it usually leans towards somebody actually having something or some sort of draw that is going to continue. I'm not saying that you're always going to, not be able to, I'm not saying that they're always going to call a raise. It's definitely something of note. So 350 here in on the flop. So now the pot's 455, right? And your head's up.
Yep.
Okay.
It's the 6 of clubs, so pairs the board.
Well, that's not great for you, I don't think. I mean, in the sense of if I was hero calling you and I'm your opponent thinking that you have some sort of combo draw or you're representing sets, then that certainly lessens, not only is it a blank, but it lessens your boat outs. Although if you were doing something with 6x of diamonds, it makes trips. So there's something like if you had 6-7 of diamonds, or any 6x of diamonds, 5-6 of diamonds, something like that.
Yeah. Maybe I'm out to lunch, but I'm thinking that I could have, I'm already am out to lunch. I'm thinking I could have a 6, and we already said I could have any of the sets. So technically I could have quads or 8s full or 10s full.
You're thinking you can have what? A 6 in the form of 6x of diamonds?
6-7 or 5-6. I mean,
diamonds.
It's not unheard of to take bottom pair for a bluff, is it? I mean, like I have check raised 5-6.
I think that would be a very, very bad check raise. I mean, you would want to go in the weeds and try to find a backdoor, but you couldn't have it. If you don't have the diamonds, I mean. Like if you had 5-6 of hearts or like 5-6 of spades, well, you can't have 5-6 of spades. That starts to get spewy. So, I mean, sure, you can have ace-6. I mean, you could have a combo draw with the 6 of diamonds in it, probably 5-6 or 7-6 or maybe ace-6 of diamonds, but that's about it. So in general, like I said, when a guy bets and calls, which is going to lean him towards actually having a hand, it's not a great barrel card, with the added caveat here that you can have some 6x of diamonds. So.
But what about having 8s or 10s?
What's up?
I could have 8s or 10s though, right? Like
no, absolutely. Absolutely. It just cuts down on your set combos because, now there's only one combo of 6s. So,
yeah. Well, I'm committed to it at this point, and I was going to go like 300, but I figured I could probably go down a bit just with the board pairing. It's starting to get scarier. I don't think I needed to fire as big, so I'm trying to make a single pair hand super uncomfortable. Like I think you could still have a lot of tens or over pairs,
Hmm.
and that's really what I'm targeting. I went 225 just because I thought it felt more value-y. Like if I ran into a boat, I would probably go a little smaller. I wouldn't blast, 2/3 pot.
I mean, the only thing that I'm going to ask you, Jonathan, is that like if you're in your opponent's position and you have, say, like aces or kings, right, and you bet the flop and you call a check raise, are you ever folding on this turn card?
My thought process on this street was maybe. I think a lot of tens could start to think about folding. I think jacks and queens at some extent, and then kings and aces are probably still holding on. But I was thinking,
On this turn card? On this turn card?
well, I just think I'm strong. Like I think check raising the flop was strong, and then following up the board's paired, and I'm still firing out. It feels like I'm not worried that the board paired. It feels like I smacked something, and I think a big hand like that would start to get a little nervous.
I would just say that for me, this has got to be one of the best cards for me to continue on if I have an overpair here because it's a blank. Like I said, with the added caveat that you might have some 6x of diamonds, but I don't really see the difference between a 6 here and like an offsuit deuce where I'm always continuing on, except for the fact that now you have less sets of sixes. Your combos of sets of sixes here, go down by 66%. And I would have thought that you would have 3-bet off with 10-10 and some 8-8 anyway. So that would have been the one that I would be looking at. I'm like, which set here makes the most sense? Oh, it's 6-6. Oh, another 6 comes on the turn. Now he only has quads. I mean, that's just my thought. So
No, I'm with you. I'm getting some fancy play syndrome here. Like I completely understand that concept. I've been a sub for a long time. I've called in a previous hand that was a pretty good one. Like I think I know what I'm doing, and I think that's what's playing into this hand is like I understand that dynamic. And so my thought process was this isn't a good card to keep firing on. I'm gonna keep firing knowing it's not a good card. And if this player understands that, he might think it's scary. It's like a reverse, but like that's just way overthinking it.
I think you're leveling I think you're leveling yourself. I really do. I think you're out leveling yourself. It's just something that, I've done in the past too. But in this particular case, I actually don't go down that many levels. I'm assuming that he calls, right?
He calls.
All right. So hijack calls. Yep.
And I'll just say this is why I called it in because I don't love like I wanted your feedbacks. This is so helpful. River, it's 905. It's the 4 of clubs, so the diamond bricks out. I guess 5-7 comes in if it's there, but not a huge concern, I think, probably.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, I'm realizing I don't think he's folding anything now that he got to the river with. So I call a bit of an audible and shut it down and check.
I actually like that play of checking because I don't think he's going to fold, number one, if he does have an overpair. And you actually have slivers of showdown value if somehow he had a higher diamond draw than you and was continuing, right? Because like what's his continuing range? It's going to be overpairs, right? And then it's going to be diamond draws, right? That are higher than you. So it's not like you have something that just busted out like entirely, like Jack 9 where you don't beat anything. You actually beat some hands that miss. So I do think the play is to check here.
To be clear, I don't have a diamond draw. I have 7 diamonds, 7 of hearts, and it's just 2 diamonds on the flop.
No. What I'm saying is that you beat a busted diamond draw from your opponent, of your opponent. So if he had a hand like King, Queen of diamonds, Ace, X of diamonds, you're beating that hand. You don't need to bluff. You actually have a sliver of showdown value. So in this particular case, I don't think he's coming off of the hands that beat you because of this run out. So you're not going to be able to bluff him. And you actually have some showdown value. So you can check and evaluate. I mean, I think that's what I would do here if I got here like this.
That's what I did. Checked and evaluated. I had similar thought process. And so the villain bets 550 into 905.
So hijack bets 550. I will bring up, as I can see some people in the live chat, like I said, we like to keep the show as interactive as possible. This brings up, and I'm not saying that I would do it here, but it just brings up the theory of check raise bluffing the river. So if you ever want to check raise bluff the river, normally what you want to have is a hand that has some showdown value as opposed to a hand that has no showdown value. And the reason why that is because if you look at this, if you have sevens and he missed a draw and he doesn't bluff, it just goes check, check, you win. But if you check and he bets and you decide, well, it's higher EV for me to turn my hand into a bluff here than to call, then you can do that. But you can't just check like Jack 9 as a total whiff, because if it goes check, check, you're going to lose. So that's the kind of the concept. Usually you want to take a not like a medium strength hand to low sort of showdown value hand that has some showdown value and check the river and sometimes check raise with it. Now, let's get to the bet here of 550. It's interesting because with your line here, you probably don't think that overpairs are doing much betting. And a lot of people don't make thin value bets because if I'm your opponent here and I was actually bluff catching you against an overpair and you check the river, it is a situation where a lot of times I might think, well, this guy is either busted a draw and is just giving up, or he is somehow sandbagging something, or I don't have, like, I'm not going to get a call here from a bet given this line. With the one exception, maybe if you had 10-8 for top two on the flop and you continue to bet the turn, you didn't want like a free card, you needed to bet large on the turn, and now you check the river. So it could be that somebody might take an overpair here and specifically target 10-8 in this particular spot. But in terms of your hand, it's now bad that you have a diamond in your hand. Probably the jack of diamonds in your hand would probably be the worst one to have. And this is just because we're looking at the diamond draws that your opponent might miss. My gut here is just a fold, to be perfectly honest with you. Now, if you wanted to like, so it looks like you guys have what, like 1,200 left here? So if you check jammed here, it would probably be for what, maybe 1,700? Actually, it'd be about 1,500 total, I think, if I'm doing this right. So if you check jammed here as a bluff, the pot would be what, like 2,900, like 1,000 for him to call, something like that. That could be somewhat of a sexy play if you thought that he was betting off overpairs and would bet fold, but I would tend to just fold out personally.
Yeah. So I followed all your logic, and I was thinking similarly. I don't think this guy's ever taking an overpair here for value, especially for this sizing. This is a pretty big size. Maybe a thinner value bet's like 300. So I thought it was strange, the big size. I'm like, this guy has a boat or nothing. And I kind of realized what you also said of like, I have showdown value, and there's a lot of busted diamonds out there.
Well, I mean, there's busted diamonds. You were blocking some of the combo draws with the 7 of diamonds. So it sounds to me like you called.
Yeah, I called.
Okay.
And he mucked.
Okay. I mean, you're getting 3-1. If you think that there's enough of a chance, like 1 out of 4 times, that you think that, and he would never bet an overpair. I mean, I see some people disagreeing with me. I mean, the very first thing I said is we wouldn't think overpairs bet here. If we don't think that overpairs are going to bet, I can absolutely get on board with a call. I was just saying personally, I might bet with an overpair to target 10-8 here, or to try to induce something. Because a lot of times, if somebody gets here with a boat like this, like say you actually had a boat, you're not going to be doing a lot of checking on the river. You're going to be probably going to try to get him to call with his overpair, right? So you're going to bet the river again. So when you check and then maybe I bet and try to target 10-8, and then all of a sudden you check jam, even though check raising the river is very, very sort of infrequent as a bluff, I don't know, I might get curious once in a while thinking, really? Are you really checking a boat here at the end? I mean, that's kind of my take. But I think if you say he's not betting overpairs at the end, then you could find a call here some of the time, and you are getting, I mean, he only bet 550 and a 900. So, you know, that's kind of the math. I think what I would take away though from this here is I probably would do some 3-betting pre, and I would just fold the flop, to be honest with you, with the guy behind me.
It's funny because my question,
and also too, the turn card is not a good card for you to barrel.
I know this hand's completely off the rails, and I knew that, but my question was actually like, was I way too far down to call on the river? And was I just like massively unprofitable play? And I just, got a huge kick out of catching this guy's bluff. But it sounds like that's one of the only street you agree with, or the one you agree with most, which is.
I don't think that the quote unquote far down in your range has anything to do with it here in this particular situation, because you're either going to have, whether you have 7-7 or 10-9, it's exactly the same. The guy is either going to be bluffing, right? Or he's going to have some sort of like thick value. Now we can call thick value maybe even like aces up or something like that, but that's the same. This would be more of, I would look at some of the blockers in my hand, and if I didn't have a diamond, I'd do more calling than not, and I'd look at, like I said, if you somehow had like Jack 10 with the Jack of diamonds, it would start to get really bad for you. Or I don't know how you'd ever have this offsuit, but like Queen 10 or King 10 with like the King or the Queen of diamonds, if you were in another configuration, that would be bad. So I'd be looking at that. It doesn't have anything to do with how far you are up or down in your range when you're bluff catching here in this spot. But I got to move along. Thank you very much, Jonathan. I appreciate it.